It's a strange kind of loneliness, the kind where someone reaches out and you look away, where you want someone to hold you, but the idea of being touched feels unbearable, where your heart is screaming for connection, but your mouth stays silent. You ignore the message, you cancel the call. You say, "I'm fine," but you're not fine. You're drowning quietly, and no one knows, because you've become an expert at hiding just how much you need someone. Why do we do this? Why do we push people away at the exact moment we need them most? It's not because we're cold. It's not because we don't care. It's because somewhere along the way, closeness started to feel dangerous. Because somewhere in your story, being vulnerable didn't lead to comfort. It led to pain. So now, when love knocks on the door, you lock it. When someone leans in, you step back. Not because you don't want connection, but because you've learned to associate connection with risk. This isn't weakness. This is self-protection. And you're not alone. In this video, we'll explore why this happens, why we isolate ourselves in our most fragile moments. You'll learn about the hidden fears behind emotional withdrawal, how trauma shapes your attachment to others, and how to slowly, gently let people in again. Because needing someone isn't a flaw, it's human. And learning to receive love, even when it feels foreign, is one of the bravest things you'll ever do. When connection feels like a threat, your body remembers things your mind tries to forget, especially when it comes to connection. See, when someone gets close, really close, not just physically, but emotionally, your nervous system takes notice. It doesn't care whether this is a loving friend, a kind partner, or someone genuinely trying to support you. It scans for one thing only: is this safe? And if somewhere in your past, closeness led to hurt, maybe through betrayal, abandonment, or emotional neglect, your body learned an equation it still follows. Your body began to associate connection with danger. Not because it's logical, because it's learned. Your nervous system, particularly your vagus nerve, is responsible for keeping you alive. When it senses emotional overwhelm, it can activate a freeze or shutdown response, something called the dorsal vagal state. You might suddenly feel numb, tired, detached. You might stop reaching out. You go quiet. You disappear, not physically, but emotionally. You think you're just needing space, but what's really happening is your body hitting the brakes, hard. And ironically, the more someone tries to lean in, the more your system backs out. It's not that you don't want to be close. It's that your biology doesn't feel safe enough to allow it. This shows up in everyday life more than we realize. You ignore a message that feels too caring. You feel irritated when someone asks, "Are you okay?" even though you secretly hoped they would. You withdraw during conflict, not because you're angry, but because you're afraid your emotions might push someone away for good. These are not failures of character. They're survival patterns. The child who was comforted learns to seek connection. The child who was hurt learns to fear it. And as adults, we carry these blueprints into every relationship, often without knowing. But here's the important thing. What was once protective may now be preventing you from receiving the love you desperately want. And healing doesn't start with forcing connection. It starts with understanding why it feels so unsafe in the first place. Because once you can name the fear, you can begin to soothe it. And that's how connection, real, safe, and nourishing connection, starts to feel possible again. Attachment styles and emotional withdrawal. There's a reason why some people run toward comfort, while others run from it. It's not about how strong you are or how much you love someone. It's about the blueprint your early relationships created, what psychologists call your attachment style. If you grew up with consistent, emotionally attuned caregivers, you likely developed a secure attachment. You believe people are safe. You trust connection. You reach out when you're hurt and expect others to respond with care. But for many of us, that wasn't the story. Maybe you had to earn attention by performing, or learned that being vulnerable would only be dismissed or punished. Maybe your caregiver was unpredictable, warm one moment, cold the next. Or perhaps they were physically present, but emotionally absent, leaving you to figure things out alone. Over time, your nervous system adjusted to survive that environment. And now, as an adult, those patterns live on, especially in your closest relationships. If you lean avoidant, you might say, "I don't need anyone." But underneath that independence is fear. Fear that needing someone makes you weak. Fear that closeness means losing yourself. If you lean anxious, you might cling too tightly. You fear abandonment so much, you'll tolerate almost anything just to keep someone close. And if you lean disorganized, the lines blur. You want love, but it terrifies you. You get close, then push away. You crave safety, but don't trust it when it comes. These are not flaws. They are adaptations. Brilliant, complex strategies you learned to protect your heart. But they can also become prisons, because what kept you safe in the past may now be keeping love at arm's length. You're not choosing loneliness. You're choosing protection, even when it hurts. You're pushing people away, not because you don't care, but because your inner system says it's safer this way. And unless you learn to recognize these patterns, you will keep replaying them, even with people who genuinely want to love you well. But here's the good news. Attachment styles are not destiny. They are maps, not cages. Once you know yours, you can begin to shift, to question the old narratives, to slowly, carefully let people in, not blindly, but with awareness. Because connection doesn't require perfection. It requires understanding. And the more you understand your own wiring, the more you can rewrite the story. The inner narratives that drive us away. Sometimes, the walls we build around our hearts aren't made of fear. They're made of stories. Quiet ones, subtle, so familiar that we mistake them for truth. Stories like, if they really knew me, they'd leave. I'm too much. They're better off without me. I should handle this on my own. I'm a burden. These narratives don't scream. They whisper, just loud enough to shape your choices, to keep you silent when you need help, to convince you that being alone is safer than being rejected. And often, you don't even realize they're there, because they sound like your own voice. They echo things you heard in childhood, things you were never told directly, but felt in the absence of empathy, in the coldness of neglect, in the unpredictability of affection. When someone canceled on you without explanation. When your sadness was met with, "You're too sensitive." When love felt conditional on how useful, happy, or easy you were to be around. Over time, you internalize the message, "My emotions are inconvenient. My needs are too heavy." It's safer not to need at all. So now, when someone offers support, your first instinct is to flinch. You tell yourself you're being dramatic. You smile and say, "I'm good." You apologize for being honest, not because you're lying, but because somewhere inside, you believe your pain is a problem. And if you believe your pain is a problem, you'll treat connection like a threat. This is how the mind protects the heart, by convincing you that needing less makes you stronger, that silence is noble, that independence is survival. But here's the deeper truth. Those stories may have served you once. They kept you safe. They helped you endure. But now, they're keeping you small. And the only way to outgrow them is to notice them. To pause, mid-thought, and ask, is this story helping me connect? Or is it helping me hide? To question whether that old belief, the one that says, "I'm a burden," is still true now that you're no longer a child in an emotionally unsafe environment. Because healing doesn't mean erasing those narratives overnight. It means slowly replacing them with something kinder, something truer. Like, "My feelings are not too much. Needing support doesn't make me weak. I deserve to be held, not just to hold." When you change the story, you change how you show up. And when you show up differently, connection becomes possible again. The cost of emotional isolation. There's a kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone, but from not letting yourself be known. You can be surrounded by people, chatting in group threads, smiling in meetings, sleeping beside someone every night, and still feel like no one really sees you. Because when you're stuck in emotional isolation, connection isn't blocked by distance. It's blocked by fear. The fear of being misunderstood, the fear of being too much, the fear of showing the soft, messy parts of you, and being met with silence. So instead of risking it, you stay quiet. You shrink your truth to fit the room. You comfort others without ever asking to be comforted. You carry your grief in private and convince yourself that you're just being strong. But here's the cost. You begin to forget what it feels like to be truly seen, to speak and be met with presence, to cry and not apologize, to be held without explanation or performance. You get so good at managing on your own that even when someone asks, "How can I help?" you freeze because you don't know how to let them. And in that moment, you feel more alone than ever. Emotional isolation is subtle. It doesn't announce itself. It creeps in slowly, through years of hiding, of "I'm fines," of silent self-reliance. At first, it feels like strength, but over time, it starts to erode your sense of worth. It makes you question whether anyone would still choose you if they saw the whole truth. And that's the deepest ache of all. Not just to be lonely, but to feel unworthy of being known. But here's the thing. You were never meant to carry it all alone. Being human was never supposed to be a solo experience. Even the most resilient hearts need soft places to land. Even the strongest souls need arms that don't ask them to be strong. And breaking out of emotional isolation doesn't require a dramatic confession. It starts with a whisper, a single sentence, a brave text, a quiet moment of honesty. You don't have to share everything, just one thing, because every wall begins to fall with the first crack of truth. And maybe that's where your healing begins. Not by shouting into the world, but by letting one person step a little closer. Not through perfection, through permission. The permission to be human again. Reaching back out, how to let people in again. Healing doesn't always begin in silence. Sometimes it begins with a reply, not a grand revelation. Not the long, tearful monologue, but something as simple as, "Hey, I'm having a rough day." Letting people in doesn't mean you have to spill everything. It means allowing someone a glimpse, a peek behind the curtain you've kept closed for too long. Because connection doesn't demand perfection. It asks for permission. And maybe, for a while, you didn't feel ready to give that. Your body was still remembering old wounds. Your nervous system still flinching at the thought of closeness. Your mind still looping the story that needing people was weakness. But if you're here now, if you're even considering opening that door again, you've already begun. So how do you start? First, recognize the instinct to isolate. Catch it. Name it. Say to yourself, "This is the part of me that's afraid, not the part that's broken." Second, lower the bar. You don't need to pour out your soul all at once. Just one truth, one message, even something like, "I've been distant, but I missed our talks." Or, "I don't have the words yet, but I want to stay connected." Third, choose someone safe. Not perfect, just safe. Someone who listens without fixing, who stays present without judgment, who doesn't need you to perform in order to be loved. And finally, remember this: you are not a burden. You are not too much. You are not weak for needing care. You are a human being wired for connection and relearning what it means to be held. There will be moments where reaching out feels awkward, where vulnerability tastes like fear, where part of you still wants to run, That's okay. You can be scared and still show up. You can feel resistance and still take the call. You can hesitate and still hit send. Because healing isn't about feeling ready. It's about deciding that you're worth the risk. And letting someone in, truly in, might just be the bravest thing you ever do. Not because it guarantees safety, but because it creates the possibility of something real. And maybe, just maybe, you deserve that. You don't push people away because you're unlovable. You push them away because once upon a time, letting them in meant getting hurt. So you learned to retreat, to protect yourself, to love at a distance, quietly, carefully, painfully. And maybe that made sense then. Maybe it was the only way to survive, but you're not that person anymore. You're not trapped in that moment. You're not stuck in that story. You're here now. You're older, wiser, softer. You're beginning to understand that protection and isolation aren't the same thing. That being seen doesn't always lead to pain. That love, when chosen well, can feel like safety, not risk. And maybe for the first time in a long time, you're letting yourself wonder, what if I let someone see the real me and they stay? Not because you're perfect, but because you're honest, because you're healing, because you're trying. You don't have to run anymore. You don't have to do this alone. You don't have to keep pretending that you're fine when all you want is someone to hold you and say, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. So here's your reminder. You're not too much. You're not a burden. You're not broken beyond repair. You're a person who was hurt, and now you're learning to trust again. Slowly, tenderly, bravely. And you deserve a love that walks in when you want to shut the door, that stays when your instincts say, run, that holds space for all of you, even the parts you still struggle to accept. So when the urge comes again, to disappear, to disconnect, to say I'm fine when you're not, pause and remember, you deserve to be held, even when you want to run.